Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to me read from my memoir. And thank you so much to Cambridge Commons writers for inviting me. It's a pleasure. So I'm going to read a bit from my memoir, which is written in short, very short flash essays. And the two pieces that I'm going to read are Sweet 16 and The Bet and the Prize. Okay. By my 16th year, I had discovered Sidney Sheldon, Danielle Steele, and the like, having moved on from Harlequin romances. That was the year that my mother took me out for cocktails for my Sweet 16. I didn't want a party, and she couldn't afford one anyway. So we got dressed up and went out to a local club. I still remember wearing my aunt's buttercup yellow silk dress. The plunging neckline revealed just a little too much of my chest, so a safety pin closed it just a bit. The way the fabric caressed my knees, just I remember that feel of silk on my knees, and shiny black high heel pumps finished the look. The place wasn't far from home, maybe a 5-minute cab ride, 4 blocks south of Roosevelt Road on Pulaski, the two main drags near us. With a name like Tits, could this place be a classy establishment? I wondered. From the outside, the floor to ceiling windows revealed the yellow and turquoise decor. Inside, there were two bars. The one up front, a long rectangle with a few tables and chairs nearby, and the one in back, a horseshoe. The yellow leather stools invited you to linger. I enjoyed the mellow R&B from the 60s up to the 80s and the constant parade of people from the well-dressed to the tawdry. There were people from all walks of life. Some I'd only read about, pimps and players, working people, middle-class professionals, you name it. This is my daughter, Leah. My mother introduced me to Curtis, handsome bartender who flirted and served me the chilled white wine with a knowing glance that promised not to reveal that he knew I was underage. The night was fun and harmless enough. I enjoyed planning the sophisticate and often returned there on my own, staying out late, meeting men, feeling grown up. Curtis, the bartender, looked out for me, teaching me that my polite rebuffs were not enough for most guys. He saw to it that I cultivated a more fuck off technique, a more effective fuck off technique. Listen, you're going to have to be a lot less polite with these knuckleheads, he told me. There are many mornings when I didn't want to get out of bed because of my late nights, but school called. My grades never suffered, though I was nearly caught dozing in class several times. Chilled Manischewitz, clubbing, reading the Kinsey and Height reports, school, and planning my entry into womanhood kept me busy. 1983 was also the year I decided to prepare for giving away my virginity. My sisters had both already done it. Half the time they didn't go to school and seemed to think sex was everything. I wanted to see if it was really that great. I planned it. There would be no baby to abort for me and certainly no boys. I walked alone to the community medical center several blocks from my house. I'm here to see Dr. Guy Aiken, I said to the receptionist before taking a seat. That day, the small room was blessedly empty as I practiced answering to my mother's name. The medical assistant seated me in the exam room. What brings you here today, Miss Young? Birth control pills. The physician who had cared for my sisters and me since we were babies entered the room and reviewed my mother's chart a few minutes after the assistant exited the room. You have 3 children? He asked after his cursory pelvic exam, raising an incredulous eyebrow. I answered calmly, yes, and that's enough. He wrote the prescription. It was years later when I realized the doctor must have known who I was and that I was still. I took birth control pills daily for exactly 1 year before having sex. With part one of my plans executed, I began working on part two. Church, Reverend Mitchell had been holding my hand for too long for a couple of years now. I enjoyed his sermons and what I saw as his straightforwardness. If he was an angel, then he was a dark one. During the year before my 17th birthday, I flirted with a minister old enough to be my grandfather. My grandmother and I sat 3 rows back from the pulpit with a direct sight line to where he sat next to the pastor each Sunday. I knew my eyes, legs, and lips were my most attractive features, so I'd remove my glasses, focusing my myopic gaze in his direction, sometimes augmenting that by sitting in the front row with my legs crossed. I fancied myself quite the seductress. Thought I was in control, orchestrating an encounter with this man decades my senior. He was only too happy to play along. There were endless calls from the payphone at my school to his home in between classes, complete with lovers' tips. The more I flirted, the more he pushed, but I had a schedule. Nothing was going to happen before I said so. Finally, my 17th birthday rolled around, and after the traditional family dinner with my grandfather and me, I asked to be dropped at a meeting in Greektown at what was then the Holiday Inn. I'd made the reservation weeks earlier, and Don was waiting for me in the room with a celebratory bottle that I had requested. Asti Gazzi Spumante, my favorite. Changed into a blue nylon peignoir while he poured the wine. I hadn't got to bring or request flute, so we made do with the cheap plastic cups found in the 2-star hotel room. Instead of sweet music, the half-star porn flick he had tuned to on the rickety television played in the background. He clearly had a quickie in mind, but he hadn't counted on my determination to create a pleasant first time. I had done my research and I intended to minimize any pain I might experience. He was not the lover I might have hoped for. In fact, the charm of his personality far outweighed his skill. Whoa, he looked at the crimson stain on the cheeks. Why didn't you tell me you were on your period? I looked at him as if he had said the sky outside was green. I'm not. The bet and the prize. After my initiation with John, I concluded that sex was highly overrated. My next encounter changed my mind a bit. Tony, my future husband, proved to be a much more skilled lover. The baker's dozen of kids he had strewn across the country should probably have been a hint. He too could easily have been my grandfather. Later, I discovered that Tony and my mother's boyfriend at the time bet that he couldn't seduce me, the smart daughter. Tony won. My grandmother's fussing I ignored. I knew what I was doing. The only objections I listened to came from my grandfather. Baby, you have to be careful out here. You don't want to mess yourself up. You've got a good life ahead of you. Everything will be fine. I carried on my relationship with Tony, continued going to high school and doing well, all the while living this new adult life. Unlike my sisters, my education would not be sacrificed. No one was using me. I was very. I think my people watching in nightclubs took the place of writing stories, but there was still plenty of time for reading, and I always had a book in progress. Nevertheless, exploring real life passion was exciting. After school and after work, spent lounging in Tony's modest apartment in the hood was all the make believe I needed. We were in love. Tony was no gentleman. I suppose my inexperience began to wear on him. Or perhaps he was frightened by my devotion. After all, he had only signed on to seduce a bookworm. He broke up with me and uh, without explanation. I told you not to fool around with that no good bastard, my grandmother said, as I lay face down on the bed, sobbing with abandon. Leave me alone, I cried, until my insides felt hollow like an empty barrel. Well, soon it was time to graduate. As excitement abounded, as salutatorian, I would speak at graduation. My family couldn't wait. He is absolutely not invited to my graduation. He has been in no way involved with my success, and I will not suffer his presence. My father sister shook her head as I declared my plans to exclude my father as a guest. I will leave your ticket at the door. He will be turned away if he shows up in your stead. My father's father, my mother, my dad's sisters all tried to dissuade me from my plan. I did not waver. I still remembered my dad showing up to my eighth grade graduation, smiling proudly after my mom and I had to walk several miles just to buy shoes for the occasion. I had asked my paternal grandfather for money to buy the cream-colored faux snakeskin pumps and matching bag. Grandfather sent my father to give me the money, and of course, most of it. My mother and I had to walk home from the store because there wasn't enough money for the bus to, and I wanted those shoes. From that moment, I was determined my father would not share in the celebration of my hard work. So these are snippets from the memoir, and I hope you enjoyed them. I am, of course, like all writers, ever working on it and developing it and developing the stories themselves. Thank you again to Cambridge Commons writers for allowing me the opportunity to read. Enjoy.